Hello, fabulous friends, fans, and superstars. Welcome to Synchronicity Web TV. I am your host, Nadiya Shah, and this is your moment of synchronicity. Well, I am so excited to celebrate with you today my friend ALEJO Lopez. ALEJO, you've seen him on my channel before because it was a year ago that he taught at the joint Synchronicity University and London School of Astrology Equinox event. And all the way back then, so many people were responding to the video, and his talk ended up being one of the most popular talks as well. And I think you're about to see why. ALEJO has this incredible way of conceptualizing and articulating how myth and astrology and our lives become integrated in ways that are so poetic that they mirror each other. And he has this depth of understanding and, again, unique way of articulating synchronicity and how we experience that. Well, ALEJO is back at Synchronicity University, this time with the November speaker series. And there's just literally a couple days left to choose your tuition rate, as low as just $5 a class. And I think you're about to see that that is an unheard of rate for this caliber of teacher. And it is ALEJO that's going to be teaching on understanding basically tough times, but he describes it as forging diamonds. So there's so much to talk about here. Let me say, ALEJO, welcome. Thank you for being back.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, you know, you and I just have this wonderful way of going back and forth. And before we even started recording, we were doing that. And I said, wait, stop. This is brilliant. Let's just stop
Yes.
and let's get recording. So let me start with this idea of forging diamonds. Like, that is a very powerful metaphor to use when looking at astrological aspects or transits. How do you make that connection between forging diamonds and what's happening with the chart?
Okay, so I got the idea. So I did some shamanic retreats, and uh, some of them were involved drinking ayahuasca. And I remember the shaman, he said, before you do the session, remember that you are in the process. Life is the process of the forging of your soul. It's like your soul is incarnated. And then as you go through lives, you need to kind of force your way through it, forge your way through it. So through sometimes hardship and difficulties, you need to recognize what your soul is asking for. And I had a vision that time that my heart was like a piece of dark rock, like coal. And at the end of the night, because usually these retreats would take the whole night, at the end of the night, like a huge beam of light went right into my heart, and it became a crystal and started shining. So when I was thinking like what to do here at Synchronicity University, I really like working with hard aspects, and I remembered this image, and I said it's something similar when you go to, you know, when you go and buy in a jewelry, you buy a nice ring or something, you have this precious stone, but before getting that precious stone, a miner had to go maybe deep into some dark place, a cave, some rock, you know, take some rock out of there, and then the rock had to be polished. And there's a huge amount of work before we can appreciate the diamond. And quite often, if you're not trained in, and I wouldn't be trained if you're not trained in appreciating rocks, you might see a piece of rock and think that it hasn't any value until somebody works through it and they make it diamond, right? We might not even recognize the value it has until they make it a diamond. And I think it's a similar thing with the hard aspects. Hard aspects, they require work, they require going to the depths, and they might seem valueless. Like how many times we're in a consultation and people say like, oh, I have all of these red lines. Why do I get sort of all of these red lines? And my feeling is that through this hardship, because we also have to acknowledge that usually it's not an easy path when you work with the hard angles, but through this hardship, these difficulties, and by facing this, we can get a gift, we can get a diamond, we can actually get a diamond. And it reminded me of this retreat with the shamanic, because when you go, this is my experience when I did the ayahuasca journey, some parts were quite hard, and the feeling I got when I saw like this rock stone and as my heart, it was like it wasn't a nice feeling. But instead of saying, okay, this image has no value, I don't like this, and let's just go away from here, I, s- I stood there and I kept talking to the images that were coming, and the rock became a diamond. So it's like, okay, there is some work I can do with myself to find this diamond. And I think it's the same thing with the hard aspect.
And so, a couple of things you said that I found really intriguing. You said your soul is something that you forge over the course of a lifetime, something to that effect. And that was articulated to you, and you resonated with that so strongly. So, how can you expand on that a little bit? This idea of how our soul is something that we forge. I'm thinking about how a lot of people, myself included, would say, well, I already have a soul, but I think when you talk about this idea of forging your own soul, it's like strengthening it, bringing it forward, magnifying its beauty and its power that much more. How do you understand, and how did you understand this idea of forging your own soul?
Okay, so for me, so the concepts of soul and spirit, I think, are very hard to define, and maybe there's a lot of subjective ideas on this. So I'm going to share mine, of course, and everybody has to see how this applies to their own perspective, right? So for me, the soul is kind of the bridge between matter and spirit. And because matter is not always the same, we're changing, it's always in motion. I think the soul is also in motion. So I do think it's true, yes, when we are born, the soul comes with us into the world, right? We are born and we're given a soul into the world. So she's our companion, perhaps. But I do think that quite often we forget about this soul, and we forget that she's also in a process of developing and learning who she is. I'm saying she. I don't know why I put it in a feminine gender. It came natural. And she's also in this process of discovering who she is, and it's part of our path. So it's maybe something we need to walk with our soul, and we can see this in astrology. I think when we think about the actually, I think it's what I talked about in the when we were doing the conference with the LSA. I was talking about how the progress moon is showing us in the chart what our soul is craving for in order to go through her journey, right? And I also see it a lot. I also think about a lot the aspects of Saturn. So the aspects of Saturn, we see them like they are hard, they're difficult, they demand commitment, and sometimes we feel some kind of a test or some kind of restriction with this aspect. But actually, it's like it's like we're in this egg. We're inside this egg, and we're looking at the world, and we want to be everything. We want to be everything that we can be, and we can be many things. But probably we cannot be everything because we need to choose. We need to choose what we want to be, and also because we have certain characteristics, right? So I think when I'm talking about this forging of the soul, I'm thinking like this process in which we realize who we really are. And I think very often we go in life and we are confused because there are so many stimuli and because we still need to discover who we are. And the forging of the soul is this moment, which I think, I mean, they're not all terrible. I don't think it's only tribulations. I think there are also expanding and gracious moments that help us forge the soul, but that help us realize who we really are, and who is this companion, this entity that is helping us always be connected with the spirit. And I think often we forget. I mean, often we forget about her. I remember in the Red Book, Carl Jung, there's a passage where he says that I had forgotten you, my soul, and now I go back to you, and it's a very very emotional passage, and I think this happens to us as well. And maybe if we work with the hard aspects, we are helping the soul develop. We're also helping not only ourselves but our soul develop because it will change how we connect with the world, how we connect with the spiritual realm, and how we find meaning and purpose. Um, so yeah, I would say something like that.
And so you said that you like working with hard aspects. You mentioned that. And I was hoping you could talk more about that because, like, I'll tell you, I have things in my chart that are quite adventurous, right? Lots of opportunities there to forge all kinds of precious stones, that's for sure. But I feel like a lot of these things where someone might look at my chart and go, "Oh, you poor thing." I've literally had people say that Pluto in the fourth, Saturn in the first. But it's almost like I feel a lot of those aspects and squares, and it really has been talking to other people, especially in this space of Synchronicity Web TV, that I've really come to understand how much those hard aspects and these challenging things have actually served me a lot. They've
Mm,
allowed me to build something that I feel good about. They've encouraged me to understand roots differently and to evolve that energy as well. And so, hard aspects, I think a lot of people get scared of them, but you're
yes.
saying you like working with them. I know for me, I have found them to be a blessing, even though they're not the path for the easy, right? They're not like an easy breezy path. And yet they cultivate so much within us, self knowledge, self respect, that very thing you talked about, that mediating force between spirit and matter, it grows stronger. The soul grows stronger as a result of those hard aspects. So tell me, what do you like about working with hard aspects?
One of the things I like is that I think they're creative. So again, this is coming from different perspectives. I'm a brave person. I'm usually a person who likes challenges, and I love the idea of the hero's journey by Joseph Campbell. The idea that we're called to an adventure, and if we face, if we look at the fairy tales, and not only the fairy tales, if we look at movies today, because movies today are like our Greek theater. Now it's in Hollywood, right? So if we look at the movies today, we see that these characters are called to a challenge, and when they respond to the calling, most often they get a gift, right? So I think these hard aspects, they are they are something like that. They are making a calling into a journey. And if we respond to the journey, we're going to be transformed for sure, and we're going to get some kind of gift. And this idea of being transformed, I find it very attractive because it means that we're going to gain something that wasn't there before. So my idea is that with the easy aspects, there is we're using the talents that we have, the skills that we have. With the hard aspects, we need to bring together planets that are in a position that is not so friendly to each other. And because there's this distance between them, we could say it's hard to play both planets at the same time, right? So we usually will prefer one planet over the other, and we will hate that the other planet is bothering planet B is bothering planet A, right? But if we get, and of course, I'm not saying this is easy, and I'm not saying I'm done with my hard aspects. I'm also working on my hard aspects. But I think if we if we get to create a space where we can try to honor both of them and honor the dialogue, something happens, and a possibility that wasn't there before, a third entity we can call it, or a third possibility, a third path that wasn't there before emerges, appears, and gives us this gift. And we cannot know in advance. I think what's amazing with the hard aspects is that we cannot know in advance. When you're in a consultation and you describe them, each client finds a different solution for this, and I wouldn't say solution, finds a different way of holding this paradox and creating something new. And it's always a creative response. It's always something new. And I think that makes the chart so alive. That it makes us feel so alive. Also because the answer, the way that we integrate them, might not always be the same through time. It's something that it's constantly requiring us to be alive, to be present, to see how we can bring them together. And I really feel like something that wasn't there before, something that is not in the chart, appears in the world. And I think that's fantastic. I think that's magic. I think it's fantastic. Yes.
Wow, well, I always thought about squares as they get things done. But the
Yeah.
way that you describe that, really, it's that impetus to have something manifest, as you called it, a gift. And there's all kinds of gifts that we can understand. Sometimes it is something material, but more often it's something within ourselves that we discover that we end up feeling is the great gift of some challenge. that is being reflected in our chart through a heart aspect.
Yes, yes, I agree. Yeah, yeah. Most of the time, I think it's an inner gift. Yes. I mean, of course, the external reality a lot of times represents the inner world, right? So things will change out there also. Yeah.
Of course.
So it's both. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I was saying to somebody about how much as I've grown more and more, they were asking me, like, what was that turning point where my relationship with my family transformed, became something else. And right now, I mean, I'll tell you, my parents are really like so close to my heart. I love them so very much. But there are some things that I just cannot do. I can do so much. There are some things I won't do, and on the one hand, I thought about how this idea of transforming the past ultimately connects to, well, I started to focus on my own healing. I started to
Mm,
focus on the kind of person I wanted to be, and that
mm,
was the work. And by becoming that person, it improved my relationships with my parents so much to what we have today, which I'd like to think is, this meeting of adults and equals. The one thing, though, especially for my dad, that's been very difficult, and the thing that I will not compromise on is, and this is me being very selfish because I want to ask you about this aspect in my chart. So I love that you're here right now to do that. But I have Uranus in the fifth house, squaring an eighth house sun. And that is
ah,
exact. It's literally off by 1 minute. It is a very exact square. And so for me, that means I just have not wanted to get married. I've never wanted to get married. And my dad,
okay.
now it's become a bit of a joke. He knows it bugs me, but my dad has wanted that so much. But that is the thing that I cannot compromise. I knew that from a very young age. And so
Yeah.
it's so interesting. The gift of that has been me, right? Has been myself, has been my own creative vision, manifesting books as my children instead of having physical children. I knew that that was the pathway for me, and I just couldn't compromise beyond that. And so let me ask you, how would you interpret something like that in a natal chart?
Okay.
Again, being
Yeah.
so
Good.
selfish, yes.
Okay, so with the sun in the eighth, I mean, I think the tricky about this is that with the sun in the eighth house, the person feels alive when they're making intimate connections, right? So there is this need of intimacy that gives me a sense of a purpose and feeling like I am myself, right? But with Uranus in the fifth, the person enjoys freedom because the fifth is like the pleasure and what gives us a sense of freedom. It could also say lovers, like you were saying, not getting married. It could also say the person enjoys having different lovers, maybe. So the thing is like, how can we mix both? How can we mix the idea of intimacy and the idea of um, freedom? And because it's a square, I mean, these two houses are naturally in a square. So planets there are always in a square. So there's always a tension between being myself, being free to explore and have fun, which is the fifth house, and being to be able to express whatever I have, and the eighth house, which is making commitments with important people, like establishing intimacy, not only intimacy, but also this idea of establishing what are our shared values with other important people, right? So there's necessarily a tension because to create these values might in some way challenge my sense of free expression, right? Now, what I would say is if this was not a square, if this was a trine between Sun and Uranus, what would we say to this person? We would say that this person has the ability to feel free, to feel authentic, to do something radically different that nobody has done before, and to bring something completely new in the world. And of course, everything has a shadow. So the price to that might be uh, that to be so independent creates a certain kind of solitude, which is maybe a Uranian feeling sometimes. Sometimes Uranian people feel a bit disconnected. You know, they love humanity, but they don't love the person they have in front of them. So now here we have to mix both. So we have a person who has this. So if we think about, okay, what is this square proposing? We think, okay, if this was a trine, I would say that this is proposing a person who is free and who is authentic and who brings something new. So perhaps this diamond that is being forged is the ability to bring new ways of intimacy, create new ways of intimacy, create new ways of uh, sharing basic values, and creating a way in which I can be both very intimate and very committed while also keeping the sense of freedom. And actually, we think the idea of support, we could think it is because I shine so much. It's because I put all of my heart in our shared values and our intimacy that this nurtures the soil that allows me to be free and to express myself in whichever way I feel. And the opposite way around, we could say it's because I express myself so authentically and so free and so independently that I attract important others who want to uh, create some inner space with that authenticity, with the whole of me, which is that authenticity. So I would approach it something like that. Does it make sense?
That is so beautiful. My goodness, you really did work with that aspect. You really did explore that aspect with depth. And I love the way that you described it. And so, yes, that was me being very selfish to everybody out there. But look, I would love to have something that people can use right away. So, for the people who are watching this, how do you feel about maybe just encapsulating a little bit of how people might be able to see a square differently versus an opposition? So lots of people
Okay.
have squares in their chart, lots of people have oppositions. Maybe you could contrast an understanding of those energies in some way so that they can start to see that aspect differently, regardless of what planets are involved, to understand the aspect itself. I think that could be useful to a lot of people right away when they look at their chart.
Yes, of course. So with the opposition, the two planets are facing each other, right? So we see the other planets, like we're walking on a road and we see somebody's coming, right? And these two planets are coming from very different places. So usually they share modalities, which means that we divide the signs by cardinal. In case people don't know, we divide the signs by cardinal, fixed, and mutable. So with the oppositions, usually the two planets have the same modality, also with the squares actually, but they're coming from different elements. So what's important for them in life is very, very different. It's completely different. So they might feel that planet A might feel that planet B is against me, right? So for the person, usually what this might create is kind of a split. It's very hard for our human conscious awareness to integrate things that are so, so, so different. So if you think about it, all of the fire signs are opposing all of the air signs. So fire is subjective and is alive and it's intense. Let's say it's this energy that is spreading out, right? And air is more detached, more rational, more civilized, perhaps, and it's more objective. So there is this one planet really wants subjectivity, and the other planet wants to be rational and objective. So the person usually doesn't know how to be both at the same time. It's like how can I make it? How can I be both at the same time? So the person will probably choose to be one. So what we need to dissect when we're doing the chart is to try to identify with which planet the person has chosen to identify with. Um, so usually, if it's the sun and the moon, they will identify with that more than with Saturn, for instance, because or with an outer, with like a Neptune or one of those, right? But you never really know. It's always a hypothesis. We always need to see what the person feels like. So once you know which planet they have identified, they are going to speak about the other planet as if it's coming from outside. So let's say it's Sun, or let's say to change, not to use Sun that we used before. Let's say it's Mars. Mars opposite Saturn. They will say every time I want to do something, something happens outside and blocks my desire. So this is a personal experience, which we have to legitimate. I mean, we have to give it's legitimate. The person is feeling that, and it's probably real in that sense. And sometimes it's really real. Like sometimes there are objective facts that are blocking the person's desire. But we, as astrologers, what we can try is to zoom out a little bit and try to show the person that it's not just the outer world, that they are not Mars when they say I want to do something and something outside blocks my desire. They are not just Mars. They are the whole scene. They are that moment that's happening, which is somebody wanting to do something and somebody else blocking it. So if we can help them see that, and we help them see them by showing them there's a pattern, by showing them that this is happening over and over again, they might be able to think, okay, why is it that my soul again has chosen to live this pattern over and over again, and what might be the lesson that I'm trying to learn, and perhaps it will soften up. The distance between the two planets will soften up. But I would say, to kind of wrap it up, with the opposition, the first feeling is that I am one of the planets, and the other planet is outside and is the enemy. So what we need to do is to kind of zoom out and see that the other planet is a part of myself that I don't know how to play. I don't know how to play both planets, so I have to put it out there. And it's a normal thing to do. It's not to be judgmental or to pretend that some people are immature because they are projecting. We all do it. It's a normal human thing to do. To some things we don't know how to cope with them, we put them out there. And then with the opposition, my feeling is that it's a little bit more internal. The planets are not coming from outside. I think actually sometimes it's harder to work with in that sense because it's more invisible. With the opposition, I think it's easy to. Sorry, I meant with the squares. With the oppositions, I think it's easy to see how the planet is working outside because it's really outside. With the square, that's what I meant. With the square, I feel it's more internal. So sometimes it's harder to see these two functions work. These two functions of the psyche trying to work together and trying to yeah, to do something together. So I always say, so this is like a dialogue. This is like one planet is doing let's do this, and the other planet is doing let's do that, and they are forced to be in the same room, so they are forced to come to an agreement, right? So what I would say is that one planet is challenging the other planet's goals or desires, and they are fighting for I would say they're fighting to have the lead, but ourselves, our not fight, but our hope maybe is that instead of making them fight, we're going to make them agree and create something together, which could be similar. Like if you are at work, you have a colleague you don't like and you detest, and you have to work together, and in the end, you do something and you end up doing the work, right? So it could be something like that. So I feel like the for the opposition, I would use words like the person might feel split, the person might feel that the outer world is doing this or that, and for the square, I would use a vocabulary that implies more like a challenge. Uh, for instance, if it's Mars and Saturn, this person's desires are challenged by certain kind of restrictions. So by bringing together, the person might be able to hold up to their desires. Uh, because it's in a way it's closer. Saturn is closer to Mars, so there's something they can do to integrate it. Does it make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. Do you think our consciousness transforms the way we experience the chart?
Yeah, I completely think so. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think the chart is a seed, and I mean I don't know what it depends. I mean I don't know. We do the work. We do the work. We look at the chart. We work with ourselves, and at some point grace descends, but we cannot force it. I mean, I don't know why for some people it happens before and for some people it happens later. I don't know why, because sometimes everybody's trying to work with it. But I do think that as we are able to be more and more aware of our chart and how we react to our chart, I also think we react to our chart. We're not our chart, we react to it. So the more we are aware how we react to our chart, um, it starts expressing itself different. And I mean, if we think about it, if you think like the way I was when I was, I don't know, 12, 16, 21, 30, and now has changed a lot. And it's always the same chart, but something has changed. Yes.
Wow, that's a very powerful example. And I didn't consider articulating it like that before, but that's really great in that, yeah, like I think about when I was young and I was just so rebellious. rebellious, like whatever it was, whatever my parents were telling me, I knew I was going to do the whole opposite, no matter what it was, right? Like it doesn't matter what it is, I'm going to go the other way. I was just such a rebel in all kinds of ways. And so it's so interesting how, exactly as you said, as we grow in age, we bring forward those aspects differently. Ideally, right? Ideally, that's the way it is.
Ideally,
But
yes.
some people do get stuck for some reason in particular patterns. Like, for example, there might be people who are very rebellious at 15 with their parents. And then at 55, they're still very rebellious with their parents, right?
Yes.
There are those, but there are ways to be rebellious in a more evolved way as well, to own that energy of authenticity that much more. And so it's
Yeah.
fascinating to think about how, and I asked you that because I know that Alan Leo, of one of our great godfathers in astrology, esoteric astrology, he articulates this as well, this idea that the consciousness of the person will determine what you're emphasizing in the chart at any given time. And that, especially when a person has a very evolved understanding of themselves and they're very aware of their life, it becomes a lot more about the core archetypal energies of the planets and how they are aspecting each other, how they're
Mm.
finding ways to connect. That moves beyond just houses, moves beyond just, transits that could be happening and signs. And it goes to a deeper level of understanding that the soul is on a journey. And this
Mm.
lifetime is like just one part of that journey. It's like this lifetime is, and this is my analogy, walking up a staircase, but we don't realize that our soul has walked up many floors, right? We're ascending a tower and we don't realize it because we think we're just going from floor 5 to floor 6. But it is during this time that ultimately we are growing, hopefully, ideally, in some way, so that we can be prepared. And as Ellen Leo says, for the next lifetime as well.
Mm.
It's interesting to think about how, when you talked about matter and spirit and soul, how that plays into a larger understanding as well as to the soul's evolution over lifetimes. Now,
Mm.
I'm bringing this up with you because I know you are a shaman. You've studied shamanism and you know mythology so deeply. And, you're like me, you're a big nerd, right? Like you've got a bunch of degrees. I got a couple degrees. So, yeah, we're nerds here hanging out, having fun. But how do you understand that? Like when I talk about this in terms of understanding whatever growth and consciousness you're having in this lifetime, how can a person then take that and maybe take a little bit more of a perspective of how their soul, this might be one part of their soul's journey, a part of a more expansive journey. Have you ever thought about that maybe for your own self and how you've come to understand that at this point in your life?
Yes. Okay, yes, I have thought about that. I just want to make a little thing. I'm not a shaman, okay? I studied
Oh,
shamanism, but I'm not a
okay.
shaman, just in case, yes.
I think right now you are, in your own way, in your own unique way, you are practicing shamanism.
Maybe, yes,
Yes,
maybe,
I think so. There's a
just in
good
case.
studied mythology, shamanism, and Kabbalah. So, okay, I will give
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
You've
yeah.
studied
You're
it.
right.
Okay.
Maybe it was confusing, sorry. Yeah.
Or maybe it was
Uh,
past life. Maybe I knew you as a shaman in a past
maybe,
life. And
yes.
that's why it just came out. Yeah.
Um, so, yes, so I think, how can we say this? Sometimes we have moments in life that are very hard and very difficult, and we're lost, and we don't know really what's the point, when like, we're just struggling with the everyday life. But there is another, like you were saying, there is another process happening parallel to that, and sometimes we're very aware of it, but sometimes we are not. We're just focused on the survival, on our lives, and then when time passes, we look back and we realize, and sometimes it's like very like stupid things that seem to have happened in the past, that actually they put us back in track. James Hillman, he says that when we're born, I mean, he takes back from Plato the idea that when we're born, we're given a demon, a daimon, I think you call it in English, which is like this guiding spirit, right? That he knows what we need in life. So I think it's like it could be good to ask ourselves when we're going through difficult times, to ask, okay, why is this happening to me right now? Why is it happening to me? Because it's again like the metaphor of the egg. We're looking at the world and we want to be everything, but we're not everything, and not everything happens to us. Only to some of us, certain things happen. So it's like, why is this happening to me? What can I do with this? And what might be, what is my soul craving for? I think this is an important question to ask. What is my soul craving for right now? And we can feel it through meditation. You can do dream work. I think if you write down your dreams, your soul is going to start giving you messages. We can do analysis, of course, and it's also, I think, a great way of contacting your soul, because like you said, the soul is taking so many, going back and forth so many times. So she has a knowledge of what we need to be happy, and we tend to be confused. We tend to believe. We tend not to know who we really are. We need to go back. We need to constantly reminded who we really are. So I think it's a good question to ask ourselves. Okay, what is my soul craving for now, and what if I'm having this difficulty or this struggle or this moment? What is it that my soul wants? Why is it that I'm put in this place now? Why is it to gain? Sometimes we don't know. I mean, to be honest, I sometimes don't know. I sometimes also be angry and get upset, and sometimes I also refuse to accept things that are happening with me, and I have to make a lot of work to try to do it. So I'm not saying I'm done. I'm over it, right? But I'm saying if we ask these questions, it might help navigating those times. Sometimes it won't, and we might see the answer later. We might see the answer later. And also, I could say, not to be gloomy. Also, this we could do this in happy moments. I mean, it's not only. I mean, we're talking about hard aspects. That's why I'm like focused more on the hard part of life. But also, when something great happens to you, when you feel joy, when you feel bliss. I love this word in English. When you feel bliss, um, it's also a moment to get in touch with your soul and say, we were talking before how I moved to Athens. Like when I was there in the Acropolis and I felt like this is my home. It was a moment when I said, "Thank you, soul, for bringing me all the way here." I mean, it took her 39 years for me to listen to that, but she's there. She's there. She's insisting.
Yeah, for this time, this is where you need to be, right? I think it came together at the perfect time for when your soul was ready to receive that message as well. But
Yeah,
anyways, yeah, go
exactly.
on. Yeah.
No, basically, yeah, that's the idea. So uh, another thing I want to say, another thing you can do to work with your soul is try to work with creative stuff. So if you have time to draw, to paint, or if you do sculpture. If you do music. But I think also sometimes we can connect with soul in ways that are not so logical. Maybe it's when you go dancing. Sometimes I think some people connect with the soul when they go jogging, and some others will see them out, they're just running, and they're not. They're connecting with something that's deep within themselves, that's sending them clues on what to do, where to go to.
It's so beautiful to tap into, to try and understand what the soul is craving at this
Mm.
point is such a powerful way to articulate it. And hard aspects can be part of what points the way. In its own way, they can help you to maybe uncover more of the answer that is unique to you by understanding those hard aspects in your chart.
Yeah, and I like that thing you said, that is unique to you. Also, I think that's part of the forging of the soul, like realizing it's only your. I mean, there's there's not another you in the world. So I think that's part of the process of forging the soul, realizing that what is it that makes me unique? What is it that makes me different? We all have the same archetypes in our chart, but they're interacting in different ways. There's something, the proportion, let's say, of the chart is always personal and unique. So I I think that's part of the journey also. It's like this cutting ourselves from the mass of people and being in touch with what makes us authentic, what makes us unique. And to do that implies sometimes giving up to some things. And I think it implies a lot of acceptance, which again is like grace. It's not something we can force. We can go work towards it, but we cannot force it. It will come when it comes. It's something we cannot force. Yeah.
That's a very powerful understanding as well. Just like you couldn't force exactly when you were supposed to be in Athens to receive that message that you're supposed to be there. Yeah, there are some things that when you strive to be aware and conscious and flow with life, they show up in their own time instead of really trying to force it. That is such a powerful understanding as well. Well, look, Alejo, I absolutely love you. We could continue to nerd out here, I know. And everybody remember that Alejo is part of the November 2022 speaker series at Synchronicity University. You've got just a couple days left to choose your tuition rate, as low as just $5 a class, an unheard of rate for this caliber of astrologer. Alejo, I adore you. I love your mind.
I
I love
adore
your
you too.
spirit. I love your heart. You bring so much heart. And I'm just so glad that you're back at Synchronicity University.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. I adore you too. You're fantastic. You're super inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody out there, for watching. And until we connect again, take care. Bye.